One administrative matter, I will not be here next Friday night, the 28th. I'm going to be out of town. It should be the only one I'll miss. But you're going to have a rest from my melodious nasal twang next week. Probably blessed relief. I want to start out by saying that I am not a clinical psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not a social worker. I'm nothing but an alcoholic who has studied the book Alcoholics Anonymous and the other literature that is available on the disease of alcoholism. I'm going to be talking about some words that are in this book tonight, and I am in no way an authority on what I'm going to be talking about. I am barely a layman. So, if you listen to me at all tonight, listen to everything I say, because I don't want there to be any misunderstanding, because what I'm going to be talking about generally isn't talked about in the fellowship. But it's important to me. It was important to me to come to some understanding in my recovery from the disease, and I want to pass it along to you. If it is not important to you, just ignore me. But do not misquote me or think that I have some motives other than what I have, and that is to pass along to you some things that I have learned and some conclusions that I have come to from studying these books. Last week we talked about the physical allergy in the first step, and tonight I'm going to be talking about the mental part of the disease. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, and I am powerless over alcohol whether I drink it or I don't. Because I've been sober a number of years does not mean that I have any power over alcohol. As we read last week, for reasons that are yet obscure, the power of choice and drink left me somewhere along the line. And our discussion last week, I tried to lead along the lines that this is in the nature of a physical defect that I have as an alcoholic that allows alcohol to do things to me that it doesn't do to a normal person. Tonight I'm going to be talking about the mental side of the disease. The second part, the hyphenated part, or the part after the dash in the first step, that our lives had become unmanageable. That was a difficult one for me to deal with, and that's why I'm talking about what I'm talking about tonight, because I had to explain some things to myself. That our lives had become unmanageable meant, well, I drank too much and things got out of control in my life because I wasn't taking care of my affairs properly, and I was offending people because I was drunk, etc., etc., etc. And I had to come to understand that my life had become unmanageable not as the result of drinking, but as the result of being alcoholic. Because when I stopped drinking, my problems weren't solved. So it wasn't a matter that I drank too much. I had problems before I ever took my first drink, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight, is what is wrong with me in my alcoholic mind. If you turn to page 23 in the book Alcoholics Anonymous and read along with me. The first paragraph there, it says, these observations, and the observations that they're talking about is the allergy that's discussed in the doctor's opinion. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink. So if I have an allergy to alcohol, I have it right now even though I'm not drinking. And if I had an allergy to strawberries, if every time I ate strawberries I broke out into hives, it would be a very simple matter for me to say, I'm never going to eat strawberries again because I don't like the results that are produced when I eat them. I don't like to have red welts on my face and on my body, and I don't like the itching sensation that is produced when I eat strawberries. And I could go about my affairs and never be bothered about eating strawberries again. It would just never eat my mind. It would be one of those things that I would have to do without. And it wouldn't cause me any problems. But it says that my allergy is something that is other than I break out or have an adverse reaction to alcohol. It says these observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. Even though the disease is of a twofold nature, physical and mental, the mental problem is the one that comes after me and gets me time after time after time after time. Unless I take the first drink, I don't set that craving phenomenon in motion. It says if you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are that he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of a man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. And here is an important statement. Once in a while he may tell the truth, but not often. And the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you had. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a great hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect that they are down for the count. I had no idea why I was drinking the way I drank. I knew I didn't want to. And in spite of everything, I couldn't stop. And I almost died quitting drinking tomorrow. For over a year, I made myself a promise. I won't drink tomorrow. And started drinking as soon as my poor beleaguered wife left the house to go to work to get me some money so I could drink in comfort. Let's turn to page 27 in the doctor's opinion. That's Roman numeral XXVII. Bottom paragraph there on XXVII. The Dr. Silkworth says, I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I have had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal which was to be settled on a certain date favorable to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. And what the doctor there is saying is that in one form or another, rather than to fight against the disease, I make a decision to commit suicide, either through continued drinking or overt acts of suicide / my wrists, throwing myself off of an overpass on a highway or shooting myself in the temple. But rather than face the fight that's required to recover from this disease, I'll just give up and say, I'm dead. Not yet, but I can't do anything about it. I'm dying. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was bleeding to death internally, among other things, having strokes. I'd already had 2 heart attacks, and I said, I don't care. It didn't make any difference because I had not been able to effect any change in my life that would enable me to live sober. And I was trying many, many things. Not too seriously at the time, but I was trying. I recognized the need until I exhausted myself and I gave up. One of my favorite parts of this book is on page 37. The bottom paragraph, last paragraph on page 37. It says, our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Then luck deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce and he is held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? You would think that this guy, if this guy was behaving this way, that they'd come and lock him up and say, son, you can't take care of yourself anymore. This is what an alcoholic does every day of his drinking life. And nobody comes and locks him up. Unless he commits a crime or offends society in some way. It says, you may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? So the book tells me that this unmanageability that I have in my life, this situation that I have where I take some good intentions, take some action, and the results turn out backwards, and I get negative results. The situation where I can dimly perceive that I cannot drink safely, that I can't drink like a normal person, yet I am compelled to pick up a drink and start drinking. Show me that these things are telling, this book is telling me that these things should tell me that I have a little bit of insanity in my life. And there's degrees of everything. And I'll tell you something, if you're a human being, you're insane. You know, some are more insane than others. If you're an alcoholic and you've lived the life of the jaywalker, you're a little bit more insane than maybe some normal people. You know, and if we're all insane in this room, some of us are more insane than others. I'm probably the most insane person in here, because I had all these symptoms. But we're not here to grade each other on their insanity. That was kind of a statement, a prideful statement that I just made, that I was the most insane. I apologize for that. Because I think my son Lloyd Pelton is more insane than me, actually. So there is something wrong with me, and I knew it. I knew I wasn't a normal person, but I didn't know what it was, and I couldn't affect any changes in my life. I couldn't produce any different results. And what I found that I had was a profound personality disorder. And oddly enough, I didn't know what a profound personality disorder was. I didn't even know what the word profound meant. So I brought a dictionary tonight that's got a definition of the word profound, and I didn't want to quote it. I brought it. I'm going to read it to you directly so that we all know what I'm talking about. It says, coming from a great depth, deep. Coming as if from the depths of one's being. Thoroughgoing, far-reaching. Penetrating beyond what is superficial or obvious. Unqualified. Absolute. Complete. Those are 5 definitions of the word profound, and they all mean the same thing. I have a profound personality disorder. It means that it goes to the very roots of my being. One of the most important things they did in this book, when they wrote the 2nd edition, they perceived through experience that they had made a profound error, and they corrected it when they wrote the 2nd edition. They put Appendix 2 in here that explains spiritual experience. The only way I ever recovered from the disease of alcoholism was by finding a sponsor through my higher power's guidance who believed that I needed to understand what was in Chapter 4, We Agnostics, and Appendix 2, Spiritual Experience. And I read it, and I read it, and I read it, and I read it, and I'm still trying to understand the whole thing that it's trying to tell me. But if you want to go back to Appendix 2 right now, I want to read a little bit of it. And that's about on page 569. You remember that when last week, I believe it was, we were reading in the doctor's opinion where he was talking about, or maybe, I'm sorry, it was 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Roland Hazard being in Europe and being under the care of this great psychiatrist, Dr. Carl Jung. And Carl Jung said that the only way that he had ever seen alcoholics recover were by these accidental phenomenons called vital spiritual experiences. And here is the error that they corrected in the second edition when they included spiritual experience. It says the terms spiritual experience, spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. So what they said was, if you just read the first 164 pages of this text, and you saw a lot, and the stories in the back, you saw a lot of examples of people who had these vital spiritual experiences, these vast upheavals and rearrangements of emotions and ideas in a split second. And it says that was not the idea that they were trying to convey. That the idea that this book is trying to give us is that anybody can have these profound personality changes, which are also called vital spiritual experiences, religious experiences, spiritual awakenings, by working the steps, 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that it is not in the nature of these spectacular upheavals. It says that these are of an educational variety. Most of us, the vast percentage of us, have these educational variety spiritual awakenings. That's what I've had, and that's what Tony's had, and that's what Larry's had, and that's what Lloyd's had, and everybody else that has done the work in the program and has been a member of this fellowship. So, I have a profound personality disorder that is cured by a profound personality change, which is also called a spiritual awakening, which is produced by doing the work. It's mechanical. It's not mystical. It didn't fall out of the sky. These are tried and true and tested principles that come out of the total human experience. We happen to have them in a form that we can use here in Alcoholics Anonymous for our own purpose. There's a lot of different ways to practice these. There's a lot of different ways to learn these. There are a lot of people that don't even need to learn them. They practice them instinctively. We cannot. We have to come here and be together to learn what these principles are, learn how to practice them, learn how to put them into action in our life, produce the desired result, living one day at a time, this profound personality change. And I can live something like a normal person as long as I don't come to believe that I am a normal person. Once I come to believe that I am a normal person, then it is no longer necessary for me to follow the directions in this book, and I'll be right back in the gutter that I came from. And if I'm lucky enough, I'll get to start all over. If I'm not, I'll die drunk. So I want to go to page 28 in the doctor's opinion. That's XXVIII.
Page number.
Pardon me?
Page number.
20. It's Roman numeral 28 up in front. It's yeah.
Okay.
XXV3I. Okay. Dr. Silkworth makes some statements in here about the mental condition of the alcoholic. The second complete paragraph there, it says the classification of alcoholics seems most difficult and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We are all familiar with this type. They are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over-remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. Type 1. Type 2, there is the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. Type 3, there is the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. Type 4, there is the manic-depressive type who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. Type 5. Then there are types entirely normal in every respect except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They are often able, intelligent, friendly people. It took me a long time before I ever found these words and they ever meant anything to me and meant something to me from the standpoint that I'd better find out what in the hell they mean. Because I still didn't know what was wrong with me. You know, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, I've got an alcoholic personality. Well, what is it? I don't know. You just screwed up. I wanted to know what was wrong with me. And this word psychopaths caught my mind because I am emotionally unstable. It says we are all familiar with this type. So it means that a great majority of us in this room, in this fellowship, are emotionally unstable. This is the term that Dr. Silkworth mentioned first, so I conclude that he thought it was the most inclusive term. It says they are always going on the wagon for keeps. And here's the one that hit the trigger in my mind. They are over-remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. And I thought, that's how I was in this fellowship for 4 years and never got sober. I never knew how to make a decision. In the first or second week at the beginning of the meeting, I talked about the commitment that you have to make in order to learn how to live sober one day at a time. Commitment and decision. I made a resolution to stop drinking tomorrow, but I never made a commitment. Make many resolutions, but never a decision. And I think we'll discover as we progress through this study that there's a couple of decisions that have to be made. And I've concluded that I have a psychopathic personality, and by very definition, that precludes me from making a decision, from making a commitment and keeping a commitment, unless I do certain things to affect this profound personality change, to take care of this profound personality problem that I have. When I first started doing a little research on psychopathic changes, I've been told in Alcoholics Anonymous, don't get complicated and don't get medical and all that shit. And I agree with that, but this really isn't complicated. So I started looking. I thought, well, I can probably serve my purposes by getting a definition out of a dictionary, and I started looking up the term psychopathic personality in dictionaries, and I finally found one that fit my needs. It says a psychopathic personality is an emotionally and behaviorally disordered state characterized by clear perception of reality, except for the individual's social and moral obligations. In other words, I know what's right for everybody else, but I don't know what's right for me. and often by the pursuit of immediate personal gratification, indiscriminate acts, or in criminal acts, drug addiction, or sexual perversion. You know, and that's me. You know, I was satisfied. I found, you know, that's me. You know, I know how you're supposed to live your life, but I can't live my own. That's clear as a bell to me. I can identify your problems. I can solve your problems. I can't identify mine. If I once identified, I can't provide an effective solution to them. Pursuit of immediate gratification. I want everything right now. Criminal behavior. Drug addiction. Sexual perversion. That's why that sex problems list is in the fourth step, isn't it? I would imagine. Here's, you don't need to turn to this. Let me tell you. And this is the only thing that's in this book about that. And Bill has, both in the 12 and 12 and in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, all of the symptoms, you know, where appropriately they're sprinkled throughout the book. All of the symptoms that are blocks, all of the symptoms of this psychopathic personality that are blocks to recovery, sprinkled throughout the book. And here's what he says. It says, "We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year." In other words, swear off. It says, "Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks." So it's what the doctor said, you know, I think I can run my life on resolutions without making decisions. I was willing to leave it there, but my able assistant here, Tony, he likes to read too, and he stumbled across a list of characteristics of a psychopathic personality, and I want to share those with you because I found them real interesting.
Time out.
Coined to fit a personality disorder identified around the turn of the century. It was accepted in the psychiatric community as a bona fide personality disorder around 1915, 1920, somewhere around there. So Dr. Silkworth, who wrote the doctor's opinion, was familiar with the term for 10, 12, 15 years probably, and he knew what he was talking about because here are the characteristics or the symptoms. It says that these are considered to be the most prominent in the diagnosis of the psychopath. Does not profit from experience. If anybody identifies from any of this, you know, just raise your hand or do like this, or does not profit, or maybe like that. Don't be too obvious. Does not profit from experience. I mean, what do we say around here all the time? If you keep doing what you're going to do, you're going to get the same results. Huh? The kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on the hot stove. lacks a sense of responsibility. What's the first thing we tell people when they walk in the door? Man, you got to start getting responsible for yourself. You need to brush your teeth, you need to shave, you need to clean up, take a bath, show up at these meetings sober, get responsible. You're a human being. Nobody else is responsible for your life but you. I didn't know that until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know I was responsible for me. I thought I was driven by forces both unseen and mystical. Is unable to form meaningful relationships. God! Holy mackerel. This really isn't too technical, is it? For a medical matter.
Hitting the nail dead on the head.
Lacks control over impulses. Lacks moral sense. Lacks moral sense. Somewhere deep down inside of me, I shoved aside my instinctive knowledge of right and wrong. I didn't lose it. I just shoved it aside, and I justified and rationalized every aberrant behavior, every stupid act I ever committed. So that I appeared that I lacked a moral sense. Well, I did lack a moral sense. I didn't appear that way. Is chronically or recurrently antisocial. I would say that on more than several occasions I committed some antisocial acts through some aggression against other people for no apparent reason other than I was obviously antisocial. Fails to have punishment alter behavior. How many people have been in this jail for a drunk offense and went and got something to drink as soon as they got out of jail? I can't believe I'm the only one that has his hand up. I can't believe you didn't stick your hand up. Is emotionally immature. And Bill talks about this quite a bit in the 12 and 12. Bill was rather concerned about our level of maturity and how to correct that. Is unable to experience guilt, remorse maybe, but not too much guilt. And the best one is for last, and this was Bill's favorite, and is self-centered. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our problem, driven by 100 different forms. Anybody read that in this book? That is what, these are the things that we're in here to deal with. You know, this is a general list of symptoms, and I think, you know, that anybody can find themselves in there, just like anybody can find themselves in their drinking pattern. You know, they can find themselves in the general list of what alcoholic drinking patterns are. You know. And there's a lot of good reading in here. And it talks about, I had planned to read about a page and a half in here, but I don't think I will. But what it concludes saying is that the condition is not organic. You know, there's nothing. It's a matter of making some changes. I can get better. I can get, if not over it, I can get it under control. You know, if I'm willing to do some things. And this book doesn't discuss what to do, but this book does. In the in how it works that Al read at the start of the meeting, it says some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil. It means nothing changed until we let go absolutely. And what that's talking about is that I have a thinking disease as a result of what's going on in my mind that I need to correct. And you hear people in the program say all the time, alcoholism isn't a drinking disease. It is a thinking disease. You know, it says our liquor was but a symptom. We had to get down to causes and conditions. That's in the fourth step. Drinking is a symptom of my thinking disease. And it says that I can't hold on to my old ideas. I can't sort through my old ideas, pick out the ones that I like, pick out the ones that I think that are valid, set them aside for future use, throw out the ones that I think are bad, and recover from the disease of alcoholism. It says that I have got to let go of them all. And through the fellowship and the program and the God of my understanding, I start to make changes in my life. And it says back in Appendix 2, willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials. And if you take the first letter out of each one of them, that spells who. And I hear people hear people say how, and that made me mad for a long time, because I'm a stickler about a lot of things. If it's in the book as who, don't say how. Well, Bill wasn't as smart as some of the people that came along after him, and he made a mistake when he put it in who order instead of how. It just didn't occur to him. But how is step 1, 2, and 3. Okay. I don't know what who is, but how, honesty is step 1. Open-mindedness is step 2, and willingness is step 3. So I got to get honest about myself in step 1 and take a look at what has happened to me in relation to what this book is telling me, and get honest. It says once in a while they'll tell the truth. You know, I got to start telling the truth to myself. And I guess it was last week we talked about how you take step 1 and step 2. It says being convinced. We were at step 3 after what in how it works after what Al read, and being convinced of the 3 pertinent ideas, what we call the ABCs. And let me read them to you. I can't quote them. It says that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, that God could and would if he were sought. Okay, I have to be convinced that those 3 things are true after taking an honest look at myself, and then I'm ready to take step 3. But we're not there yet. I just wanted to point that out to you, that if I am convinced of A, B, and C, I've got to have some idea of what I am convincing myself of. I had a great deal of trouble with this, trying to convince myself that something was wrong with me, since all I wanted to do was drink in peace. You know, if the bitch would just shut up, I don't think I'd have trouble. But what I have come to find out that I had, when I turned loose of all these old ideas, I found out after the fact what I had done. I was able to finally surrender and start working these steps. I was able to convince myself without knowing what I was surrendering to or for. I was able to surrender because there was nothing else left in my life. I'd just run out of all options. I'd tried everything. I was losing everything that I hadn't already lost. And I was able to surrender. But working with a lot of people that have had higher bottoms than some of us have had, sometimes they want a little more information. You know, it's easy to surrender when there is no doubt left that you're totally defeated. But here's what I had to do. I had to admit that I was powerless over alcohol, whether I drank it or not. It just doesn't make any difference. I have no power over alcohol. It doesn't exist. The book tells me over and over and over I've lost the power of choice. The book also tells me that a spiritual remedy that is taught in this book will relieve my alcoholism one day at a time. I had to recognize that my solutions to problems didn't work. Generally, the reasons why my solutions to problems didn't work was because I couldn't identify the problem, number one. And number two, if I could correctly identify the problem, because of my self-centeredness and these other personality deficiencies, I always arrived at a solution that was neither sensible, fair, or equitable to anybody, including myself. You know, I just think backwards. You know, I don't know how many times, even sober, have a pretty nice day and I'm on my way home and I think, man, I think it's going to be nice tonight. I'll have a little dinner and we watch a little TV and then we'll get in bed and we'll talk a while and everything is just going to be perfect tonight. And I walk in the door and I say, I don't smell anything burning. What's the matter? Didn't you cook tonight? I had some intentions and some expectations, but somehow I just couldn't get everything arranged.
Yeah.
And there's examples of that throughout my life. I just always came up with the wrong thing at the wrong time. Something that I could ensure that I would be denied the result that I thought my intentions would enable me to get. If my solutions don't work, then I have to admit that I can't solve my problems. If I can't solve my problems, then I am stuck because all I know is all I know. So I have to finally be willing to ask for and accept help from another human being. And I've got to do what I'm told, because I don't have a chance on my own. And that's a tough surrender to make. You know, I think I've been out here fighting this world all by myself for years, and look what's happened to me. You know, how can I trust another human being? I can't even trust myself. But I have to be willing to ask for and accept help and do what I'm told. You know, and I'm not required to understand it. I'm not required to like it. I'm not required to do anything. But if I want to get better, I need to do it. You know? And these surrenders are not a one-time thing. It's an all-the-time thing. The surrender that's required has to become a part of my life. You know, it's not a brief mumbling of the first step and saying, I believe that and I accept it. And that's in the nature of a resolution, but not a decision. To make a decision, I have to make a commitment to this surrender that I'm in the process of making. And in the unmanageability where I start to work on this personality, this profound personality disorder that I have to admit that I am wrong about God, about myself, and about other people. I don't see anything clearly, and all the conclusions that I've come to over the years, regardless of what the source is, are just flat wrong about myself, about God, and about other people. And these are some of the old ideas I have to start to give up. I have to start opening my mind to the fact that I am wrong. I have to finally admit that my habits of thought, my beliefs, my attitudes are wrong. They're not producing the results that I want. And I got a picture in my mind that hasn't changed for as long as I can remember. I have a picture up here, and it hasn't changed. And I can't get close to fulfilling what I can see in that picture. I know the person that I want to be. I know the person that I truly am, but I can't get it out. And it's because of this, my bad habits of thinking. I think that if I believe it, that it's right, and that I don't need to investigate other things, that I don't need to open my mind to other possibilities, and my attitudes about life are wrong. Through its curious set of circumstances, all of this has just come to ball up in a big wad of snakes that I've got to start working on. And lastly, that I am immature. Being in a 42-year-old body, and I'll qualify that by saying I was 42 when I got sober, since you may suspect that I'm somewhat older than that. Being in a 42-year-old body and having responses to life of a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old or a 12, 13, 14-year-old were just unacceptable among adults. I always had inappropriate responses to life, which by their very definition were self-defeating. I was blocked every time I turned around because of inappropriate responses. Impulsive type responses that I talked about in the characteristics of a psychopathic personality. And finally, I had to come to believe that if I didn't do something about me, that I was just worthless as a human being. Because I wasn't making anybody happy, including myself. And it says somewhere that one of the purposes of being a human being is to live a happy life. If I'm not happy, why am I here? If I'm not happy, what am I going to do about it? And if I'm not going to do it now, when am I going to do it? I got a lot of favorite little tidbits in this book. I want to read you something that describes me when I came to the fellowship. And it was me the first 4 years I was in this fellowship, and I was still drinking, and it was like me for a number of years after I stopped drinking, before I had spent enough time and effort in this program to start to get some different results in my life. This is in the chapter We Agnostics, and it says, this is me when I came here. I was having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. I was prey to misery and depression. I couldn't make a living. I had a feeling of uselessness. I was full of fear. I was unhappy. I couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. And that was me. And on page 50, I'm not going to talk an hour tonight. I'll probably give you a big relief. Page 50, the last paragraph. It says here, thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. And worldly indeed means that, they're not dummies. They've been around the block a couple of times. Some of them got education, some of them travel, some of them have special talents and skills, abilities. They're worldly. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Power, peace, happiness, and a sense of direction. That's what you get in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous if you are willing to do the work, if you are willing to give up, if you're willing to turn loose of the old ideas, if you are willing to follow direction, if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to learn, or if you're willing to act differently while you learn. And the next 12, 13 weeks, we're going to be talking about what steps we take to effect this change. And I think I'm going to conclude right there tonight, and thank you all for listening.